Good morning to you. It's Thursday and welcome to Pen Vicarage on this lovely day. Good to see you and thank you for joining us for our Bible talk for today. May I remind you, the second week of our Alpha course begins tonight. We had a wonderful introductory session last week. About 13 people joined us last week. Hopefully one or two more tonight. If you want to join in, you're very, very welcome to do so. Just send me your email and I'll send you a Zoom invitation for this evening, 8 o'clock till about 9, half past tonight, and you'd be really, really welcome. But that's tonight. But you've come this morning to find out about the Bible. We are in the Gospel of Matthew and we're in chapter 18. Quite a long reading this morning, 20 verses. Chapter 18, verses 1 to 20. Lots in here. I'll try and help you with it afterwards. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called the child, whom he put among them, and said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you'll never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever becomes humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And if any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it'd be better for you if I had a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks. Occasions for stumbling are bound to come, but woe to the one by whom the stumbling block comes. If your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. For it's better to you to enter life maimed or lame than to have 2 hands or 2 feet and be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to stumble, tear it out and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and to be thrown into the hell of fire. Take care that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I tell you, in heaven their angels continually see what the face of my Father in heaven. What do you think? If a shepherd has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly I tell you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 who never went astray. So it is not the will of your Father in heaven that one of these little ones should be lost. And if another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when 2 of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you've gained that one. If you are not listened to, take 1 or 2 others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where there are 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there among them. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Wow, a lot in that reading this morning. Where do I start? Firstly, there's a wonderful irony that only in yesterday's reading, which presumably was very short before this, Jesus is talking about laying down his life, giving up his life for the world. And yet, almost in the verse after, the disciples are asking the question, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Notice here in Matthew, they don't ask which of them is the greatest. They simply say, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? What Jesus famously does then is he takes a child, puts a little child person amongst them and says, whoever becomes like one of these, so unless you change and become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And he goes on to pad this out a bit, whoever becomes humble like a child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So what he's focusing here on is the humility of little children. And this could mean lots of things, but I think it means mostly to know your dependence on God. A little child is frighteningly dependent on parents, frighteningly dependent on powerful people around them, parents, carers, all sorts of people, doctors, nurses, whoever it may be. Little children are very, very dependent. They're not concerned about the kid in the bed next door. They're concerned about they're completely dependent on the adults around them. And I suppose in a sense, I think it's like that really. I think we need to know, we need to change. He says change is quite a strong word. We need to change and know our utter dependence on God. Like a child is dependent on their parents, so we are utterly dependent on God. And I think the more you are aware of your dependence on God, actually, the greater you are, the greater you and I are in the kingdom of God. Thing is, though, God, that's true, and that all holds true, and we all need to know. We all must recognise in our lives our utter dependence on God. There's a phrase in the Old Testament: "The pillars of the earth belong to the Lord." Yes, the pillars hold things up. God's holding everything together. We need to know and be reminded of our complete dependence on God. But it doesn't end there, because God, in His infinite goodness and mercy, chooses to delegate some of that caring responsibility to humans, and that is an awesome responsibility. Speaking of children, I remember when our eldest one was born, being presented with this little package in my arms and thinking, this little thing's dependent on me for many years. It's up to me to calm this child down, get it to sleep, look after it, and all this kind of stuff. And children are frightfully dependent on the parents, and it's an awesome responsibility as a parent. I remember driving home after my first one was born, and driving not as fast as I used to drive before, because I suddenly felt the awesome responsibility of being a parent. And actually, likewise, parenting in the kingdom of God doesn't just mean parent look after our offspring. It also means looking after new Christians. It means being aware of children especially children in the Christian church, and the responsibility that God shares with us for their care, for their protection, and for their guidance in life and their guidance in the Christian life. And God delegates some of that to us. And I suppose what we need to be aware of now, what Jesus goes on to say, is we need to be aware of the awesome responsibility that is. Many people love power. The church, we're not immune to this. We love our titles, we love our positions, we love our status, we love all this type of stuff. Of course we do. But actually, we need to know that responsibility and power and influence and so on are an awesome responsibility. And Jesus uses very strong language, the fancy word for it is hyperbole, to kind of ram that point home. So he said, whoever puts a stumbling block before the little ones, like Betty, for them to have a millstone hung around the neck and thrown to the bottom of the sea. And these are strong. So he mean here, doesn't mean literally millstones around the neck, but he means, be aware of the awesome responsibility, and make sure that you don't do things that stand in the way of people's growth in faith, that don't stand in the way of children's safety and protection and guidance in life. And he also goes on to talk about this very difficult bit about if your right hand offends you, cut it off, and if your right eye offends you, pluck it out, and all this type of stuff. And I think what he means here is, he doesn't mean literally do that, otherwise there'll be an awful lot of one-handed, one-eyed people around. Of course, he doesn't mean literally do that. I think what he means is make sure you're doing it right. Make sure you're living life. Because actually, if you're not living life right yourself, if you're not right with God yourself, you're not in a position to keep everybody else right. So I think what he means here is make sure, especially if you're in a position of any kind of responsibility in the church, make sure that you are doing it right. Make sure that you're not doing anything in your life which is a stumbling block, and make sure that you are doing the Christian life properly. And if necessary, take drastic measures to kind of make sure that you are. And then he talks about the care and the love which he has for his children. He talks about a shepherd having 100 sheep, and one goes astray, but leaving the 99 and going after the one. In other words, really care about people that you are under your responsibility. I remember a man in Jamaica said to me years ago, a great man shows his greatness by the way he treats the little people, and care about people. Care about everybody. It's a heart thing as well as a head thing. And he's talking here about a shepherd who is prepared to leave the 99 sheep to go after the one that's gone astray. So be prepared, because you care that people will go astray, but be prepared to go and see what you can do to help them. And then he gives some advice for the church. If someone goes astray, don't just leave them going astray. Help them back, And if they won't listen to you, take a witness. And if they won't listen to one, take two more. But do it. And the whole aim here is to bring people back, to care about people in their Christian faith. And children go astray, and of course they do, and people go astray, and people go astray in their faith, but we need to do what we can to keep everybody reconciled, to keep everybody going in the right direction, to keep everybody living in God's way. So he's talking here about, we all need to be aware of our dependence on God. But actually, God delegates some of that. But we need to be aware, as well as, because as I said, we like power, we like position and status and everything else. We need to be aware of the responsibility that we have to make sure that we're not doing anything that's stumbling block to others, to make sure we're living life properly God's way, to really care about people, to be prepared to go and help them if they come astray, and also to remember to do what we can to guide people back in the faith. And remember, as I say, that with position, that with power comes responsibility. Thus says somebody who yesterday on Tuesday morning was leading 2 churches and now is leading 6. Your prayers, please. Anyway, hope that's helpful. God bless you. More tomorrow, and have a lovely